Hello everyone, welcome to Tutorials by Decade. My name is Decade, and in today's video we're going to work on rooms some more. Off camera I built two little rooms, one to the left and one to the top of the room that we've already created. Again, you don't have to make them look exactly like mine. This is just so that way I can show you guys what to do with these cameras and a few other things. So one of the first things that I want to show you though, you see this cliff here that I made in the second room? Sorry about that. But do you see this cliff that I made here in the second room? Well, in the tile palette, there's actually shadows that are supposed to go with this cliff. The problem is, right now, if you put it on the walkable layer, you see it gets rid of all the grass. And if you put it on the collision layer, this entire grid square right here will be not able to be walked on, so the players will be like confused as to why they can't get up to the cliff. So what you're going to do is under grid, you're just going to right click, you're going to go to 2D object, tile map, a rectangular, and then just name this shadows for now. So now on the shadows, we can put these on one. We want those on one. Collisions are on one. I want these to be on top. I'll just put them on one for now and see what they look like. But anyway, now you can actually add those shadows in, which will give a little bit better of an effect on what we're trying to do here. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but okay. So yeah, actually that looks pretty good right there. So so you can add as many tile maps as you need, tile palettes as you need. So like 2D tile map, rectangular, and you can reorder them so that way they show up. And we're going to get more into that a little bit later when we get into like going behind buildings and things like that. So for right now, I just wanted to show you that. Another thing that I wanted to show you was, I just realized I made a mistake right there. So we'll go to collisions and we'll fix that real fast. Let me click. There we go. There we go. So another thing that I wanted to show you real fast, with the cameras, room cam. There we go. So down here, you'll see what's called a dead zone. So if I go to game, right now you kind of got the crosshair right on the player. So the way it's going to work is no matter where the player moves, the camera's going to follow you until it hits its boundary. But if you add a dead zone, you'll notice that now that there's this little box around your player. And down here is where you change the dead zone size. I think 0.25 and 0.25 will be great. But there's two reasons why you want to do dead zones. Number one, you don't necessarily want the camera to move every time the player moves. And also it adds a little bit of an acceleration to the camera, which could help people that like get motion sickness while they play games and stuff like that. So you can play around with that, but like once I start the game up, I'll show you what this actually does. So notice how the camera doesn't move as long as I stay within that box, but as soon as I go out of that box, there's that little bit of an acceleration. Another thing I'm sure you've noticed in previous videos, you kind of see this little tearing going on. Of course I didn't do it that time. But like if you see those little that tearing going on, there you go, it just did it. That is something we're going to fix with what's called a sprite atlas. I'm not going to do the sprite atlas right now because every time you do a sprite atlas and you make changes to the sprites within the atlas, you have to repack the atlas, and it gets to be a giant pain. But nonetheless, that is something that we're going to have to suffer through for a little bit until we get to the sprite atlas part of it. But if you want to do it yourself, anywhere, preferably in your art folders, you want to just right click, go to create, go to 2D, go to sprite atlas, name it whatever you want. I'll just name it test. And when you click on it, you'll see right here it says objects for packing. What you would do is you would come in here to your sprites. You just hit the plus now. You don't have to drag anymore. But you just type in what you want, like overworld. And then, you know, pack preview, it generates it. You will have to go in and rechange the compression to none, filter to point. Things look real blurry until you click somewhere and actually save those changes. And now when we play, there's no more of that tearing. So if that tearing is driving you crazy, go ahead and do a sprite atlas. But again, since we didn't make all the changes to all of our sprites, if I do it now, if I change anything in those sprites, I'll have to go back and repack the atlas, and I don't really feel like doing that right now, so I'm going to delete that. But nonetheless, I wanted to show you that. So now on to the main purpose of this video, which is showing you how to actually transition between these rooms. And obviously I don't have a third room over there. I'll get to that eventually, but the easiest thing to do right now is to highlight the camera that you've already created, hit Control C, go to your next room, hit Control V, it'll automatically make it a child of that room, and then just rename it the proper name of that room. And you want to disable it. And then you're going to do the same thing for this room. I didn't actually put them in the room, so we'll have to go back and do that. But nonetheless, you want to copy it so that way the settings are the same amongst all of your cameras. We're just going to do that, and we're just going to drop that there. There we go. Otherwise, if you forget to change a setting like that dead zone or the orthographic size or anything like that, then you know, whenever it transitions to that camera, things are going to look really weird. Now, if you're looking for that effect, by all means, but if you're trying to make it look, you know, similar throughout, then you don't want that. So even though we have those cameras, if we hit play, we're still not transitioning into the other rooms. You'll see here in a minute that once we get to the end, I can just walk right out. There's no transition. So what we have to do is we have to go to our rooms. I forgot to do this, so I'll fast forward this, but we'll make sure we have the confiners. I'll fast forward through all this. So I fixed that. I forgot to put the boundaries on the rooms there, the polygon colliders. So on each of the cameras, though, what you're gonna have to do is that it's a machine confiner. You want to make sure that you have the right rooms attached to that as well, or else things can get a little weird. But now that that is done, in order for the cameras to transition and switch on and off, we're going to have to do a little bit of code. So now we get to finally add a new script. So I'm just going to create a folder here just called rooms. And in that folder, I am going to create a mono behavior script and name it rooms. And then we're going to open that up. We don't need an update, so we can delete the update. But one of the things that we are going to need is up here where it says using Unity engine. We need to make sure we are using Sin Machine. Did they change it where they no longer need to add the Sin Machine? Huh. Well, we're gonna try it real fast without any of that. Maybe we no longer need that. Oh, we'll find out. So anyway, what we need to do is add some variables. So the first thing we're gonna do is create a tooltip, and the room name, and we're gonna create a public string room name. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put serialized field in here. And we are going to make a private vector2 int grid location. So these first two things are mainly going to be just for like development purposes. Although some of these things you can use within your game, such as the room name. So there's that. We're also going to see if this works because I'm not 100% sure. Sin Machine. Oh, look at that. It does include it. Sin Machine camera. And we're just going to name it the camera. You used to have to add it up here, but it looks like it automatically adds it now as you go. So that's pretty cool. If you want to type that out, you can type in using unity.sinmachine. But since we have that on here, it automatically put it up there. So that is really awesome. All right. And then there's two more things that we need to add. Serialized field, private bool, starting room, and we're going to default that to false. And then one last private bool, player has entered. And we're going to actually default that to false as well. All right. So what's going on here is the public string room name is just the name of the room. Later on, if you want to have like the room name pop up whenever the player enters the room, or have the room name in the upper left hand corner or something like that, you'll be able to do that by naming the room. The vector2 int, it's the vector2 integer for grid location. That is mainly going to be for development purposes, so that way you know what room you're actually working in. It's not really necessary, but if you're going to build a huge map, you're going to want something to indicate where you're at. The Sin Machine camera is obviously the camera that it's going to be in that room. And then these two bools, one is for starting room, one is for player has entered. What they're going to be is at the start of the game, the system doesn't know which cameras to turn on or turn off or anything like that. And also, if you forget to turn a camera off or something like that, we are actually just going to make it real simple by doing everything with code. So that way it all works without you having to go through and wait, I forgot to do this room or I forgot to do that room. And then the player has entered is going to come into play for when the player enters a room and or leaves the room. You'll be able to to notate that so that way certain things can turn on or off, such as the cameras. So what we're going to do then is in the start, we're going to do a couple if statements. So if starting room, so that's again saying if this is the starting room, we're going to default player has entered to be true. And then the camera dot game object dot set active true. So what that's saying is if you designate something the starting room, then it's automatically going to put player has entered to true, and it's automatically going to turn on the camera. But, or should I say else, if it is not the starting room, then player has entered will equal false, and the camera dot game object dot set active to false. And essentially what that's saying is any room that is not designated the starting room, it'll automatically shut the camera off if you accidentally left it on, and that the bool will automatically be set to player has entered to false. So how do we go about actually telling the system if the player has entered the room or not? Well, the easiest thing to do is a private void on trigger enter to D. So if you hit enter after you type that in, it'll automatically change some things here. But some people like to leave this as collision, others like to name it other. I tend to name it other. That's just how I do things. I've also seen people name it what they're trying to collide with, like, you know, for instance, the player or whatnot. But for now, we're just going to name this other. You can do whatever you want as long as you know what it is. So one of the things that we're going to need to do is tags. I believe I went over tags in another video, but if I did not, when you click on an object at the top here, you can see where it says tag. So Unity automatically creates a player tag. So we're going to designate the player. You can create other tags down here by hitting add tag and then adding a tag right here. We're going to be doing that a little bit later, but for right now, Unity already gives you a player tag. So if you haven't already tagged the player as a player, make sure you do that now. So it's not going to give you this little wiggly red line underneath it. So if it is not spelled right or anything like that, it could cause issues in running the actual game. So just make sure you spell right and make sure you use capitalization where it's needed. But anyway, what we're doing here is checking if the collision that's happening, if that thing that collided with it is the player. So if it is, and another if statement within it. So if it is the player that collided, but the player is not already entered in the room, then we're going to have a couple things happen. And essentially, we're going to change player has entered to be true. And if the camera is not already on, we're going to turn the camera on. And that's all there is to it, really. So what do we do if the player leaves the room? So we got to do another private void on trigger exit 2D. And again, I like to change that to other. You can do whatever you want. And essentially we're just going to do the opposite of when they enter. So player has entered will equal false, and the camera dot game object dot set active will be false. And that should be all that we need to do for right now. So we'll save all of that. We are going to go back to Unity, and if it didn't already compile, which it's not letting me switch to Unity because it is compiling. There we go. Now what we need to do is we need to go to each room that you have created and add the room script. So for the camera, you want to drag that room's camera into that. Since 0.0 or 0.0 is the starting room, we're going to check on that. You can name it again if you want. I'll just put starting room. And the grid location's already at 0, 0, so we're good there. So now we just got to do the same thing for this room. I'm not going to bother naming it. We'll just put that at -1. We're going to drag the camera over here. We're going to make sure that that stays unchecked. And then for this room, we're going to add the component and then the script for rooms. Again, not going to name it, but we are going to put the grid location, and we are going to bring the camera in. And now what we're going to do is we're going to test it. So let's hit play. And Unity's got to do a few things, but there we go. So let's head on over to this room and see what happens. So it transitions, and now we're using the camera in this room. So if you go to scene view, you'll notice that the camera over here is shut off. The camera up there is shut off, but this camera is actually on. So back to game, we can move around. Our collisions are still good. Now, the one thing about that transition is it's a little slow. Let me test this other one real fast, and then I will show you how to fix that. All right, so that transition's good. And then we transition back in. Perfect. So everything's working the way we want it to work, but not fully yet. We want to make sure those transitions are a little bit quicker. So in order to do that, you have to go up to here where it says main camera, and you click on that. And if you clicked on main camera before we installed Sin Machine and added Sin Machine cameras, you would notice that this did not exist. But since we added some cameras from Sin Machine, we now have what's called the Sin Machine brain. And you'll notice down here where it says default blend, and there's a bunch of different things that you can do. We're going to keep it as ease in and ease out, but instead of 2 seconds, we're going to change that to 0.5. Now we're going to hit play. And now whenever we transition from one room to the other, boom, it's going to be pretty quick. So you can play with that and change that however you want to change it. I found 0.5 to be pretty cool. It seems to work really well. But again, you can change that to whatever you want to change it to. One other thing that I want to do is a quick fix for the collisions. I believe the collisions... not the collisions, the player. There we go. So for the rigid body 2D, for the collision detection, continuous, it uses a little bit more power under the hood, so to speak, but you're always checking for collisions. So it makes it harder for players to glitch the map and then, you know, end up outside of the map or anything like that. So you definitely want to make sure that that's on continuous. But we've accomplished everything that we wanted to accomplish for this video, so we're able to transition from one room to another. And with that information, you can actually start building a map. Obviously, there's some other things that we want to do, like transitioning to an interior scene. or, you know, a dungeon or things like that. We still have a lot more to go. So with that being said, I'm going to end this video here. If you guys liked it and thought it was helpful, give it the big old thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that little bell to get notifications for the new videos that come out. And as always, I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day.